Samvi. Our topic tonight is a vital one, which is public transport and where are we headed with it. Joining me tonight, two very senior gentlemen in their respective fields. Right next to me is Senior Professor Rohana Mahaliyanaarachchi, representing the United Republic Front, and over on the far side is Dr. Dileepa Witharana, representing the National People's Power. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank
you. Delighted to have you both with us, and both of you are well known in your respective fields, academically especially, and it's nice to see some professionals like yourselves getting involved in policy making in the parties, and hopefully you will continue to be involved no matter which party wins the upcoming elections, because we all know what a mess the politicians made of our country, and it's definitely time for the professionals to be much more involved in guiding the country's fortunes. Professor Rohana, let's begin with you. What is wrong with our public transport at the moment? And I ask this in the context that it doesn't seem to have changed in 40 or 50 years. It's the same stations, the same type of trains, the same type of buses. Meanwhile, the rest of the world, including in South Asia, has gone far past us. What is the issue?
Yes, Nash, if we go back to 50 years and come front, we can say that our in 1970s, if we compare from that era, the train system, especially in Sri Lanka, had been deteriorated. I can remember in 1970s we had trains which were more, they were running on timely, and quality of that trains are far better than today, and stations also far better than today compared to the that time socio-economic conditions of the country. And when we see today, after 50 years, we can say it hasn't moved at least 1 inch forward, it has gone back, I think, miles. So, that is the situation regarding the trains. And regarding the buses, from the public transport purview, we had the government owned bus service. In 1978, under the G.R. Jayawardena's government, they introduced this private sector buses. I can remember in 1979, 78, 79, when they were introduced, there was some quality, minimum quality, better quality, especially in the long distance transport, not in the metropolitan transport. But consequently, what has happened, today's situation, and if you talk about the private bus transport, people will they know, the whole society knows what has happened. And I think that the one mistake that J.R. Jayawardena had done by starting when he was starting the private bus system, without giving it to some companies, well organized transport companies, he has introduced a system called ad hoc system, mess up system, given to his henchmen to put the buses to the road, and finally what has happened, now you can't control it.
So, it's in effect being controlled by a few players who are basically not keeping up to the standards.
That there are if you take the private bus system, how many owners are there? So, there are I think about 700, say around 5 to 6, I do not know which numbers, but about 50,000 buses I think. I can't exactly say that number, but how many owners are there? Some people have only one bus, some people they have 2-3 buses. So, like that there are thousands of owners and there is no controlling system. It is true that they have these societies which we call bus sangam, but they are just for only for their sake.
Dr. Dileepa, from the point of view of the commuter, commuters don't have very many rights in Sri Lanka. Buses stop when they want, conductors and drivers shout at the commuters, and people are packed in, it's like a sardine tin, and there's absolutely no law or regulation or rights. What is your opinion on that?
Now, I think it's a good question in the sense that now for example, now we say that in this country there are only subjects, not citizens. So the what do we mean by subject is that we are very obedient. We don't come forward and talk about our rights. I think one reason is the public transport system, in the sense that you are packed in a public transport bus or in a train, and especially in a bus, you are under the control of the conductors and drivers who are not trained very well, right? So for a let's say for a day, for a working day, passenger spends hours in a bus to come to work. So they are like trained by the conductors and the drivers to be obedient. So it's a serious issue, and I think the bottom line is the reason behind that is that we have not paid any attention to public transport during the recent past. It was neglected. So so when it comes to transport planning, the focus was on kind of private vehicles and town-based transport. But when you talk about the entire island, I mean, there are rural areas, urban areas, right? Main roads, by roads, long distance transport, short distance transport. So there are a lot of issues involved with all these sectors when it comes to public transport. But we haven't paid any attention to this complicated list of issues that are there in all these sectors. We were just kind of, our planning was that we were like kind of a ad hoc interventions we were doing when it comes to transport, but we never had a kind of a comprehensive overall planning process for public transport.
Dr. Dileepa, this is not rocket science. When a city anywhere in the world grows to a certain size, then it needs a proper railway network, whether it's above ground or below ground. You can call it the London Underground or the metro or whatever you want to call it, but it's trains, and sometimes it's above ground, sometimes below ground. And then you have the bus system as well, which should ideally be linked, the timings should be linked to the arrival of trains. It's as simple as that. And cities all over the world, hundreds of cities, including in neighboring India, Chennai, Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai, they all have these proper transportation systems, but we don't. So, what's stopping us?
I think the issue is that it's not a kind of a coordinated system. Train system operates isolatedly, right? The bus system is another thing. So there is no overall coordination. So, as the NPP, one thing we are proposing is that we need to have a kind of a major coordinating institute, so that all the kind of public transport modes are coordinated, and there has to be kind of a timetables also synchronize with all these modes of transport. So, that was not there, because people were not in the center of transport policy in the recent past. People were in fact missing, right. So, you were kind of focusing on various other things. So, when you bring people back to the picture and place them in the center of transport policy, I think then we have to think about coordinating all these modes, having kind of a synchronized timetables, and improving the quality of transport for passengers, and all these things comes to the picture when you bring people to transport policy designing. So, what I have seen so far is that people are missing.
But Professor Rohana, now going by what Dr. Dileepa said, basically people were missing from the equation because of the arrogance of the politicians, the so called rulers. The Sinhala word is balaya, coming to power rather than coming to office. So, taking office to serve the people. No, in Sri Lanka it is rulers coming to power, and they, as you very rightly said, they treat the people as subjects. Now, this certainly has to change, especially with the current economic situation. What would you say about that?
Yeah, you see that it's a very simple example. When our leader, UPF leader, when Mr. Champika Ranawaka, he was the Minister of Megapolis, he has planned and he has started, not just planned, he has started this light train project. That is 4 lines to come to Colombo, to avoid the traffic, to make the facilitate it with the high class transportation system to introduce to the people. And they got a loan from the long term loan from the JICA, which you have to pay 0.1% per annum, and also 12 years grace period, and you have to pay with the 40 years. And it has been started. What has happened? The next president came. I do not know, some person has given advice to him, person or person, a group of people, and he stopped it without calculating what is happening and when you are going to pay that, and what is the cost benefit analysis. You see that if you take a train, it can be a light train or it can be a overground train. If it is a compartment, generally you can put nearly 1200 passengers in a carriage. By bus, you can bring only 50 maximum with good facilities, not like our sardine packed ones. But if you see that cars are coming with only 1 person or maximum 2 people. So, how many people are coming to here, and what is the cost benefit analysis? How much diesel you are spending, how many petrol you are spending. If you use a train system, the first you have to pay the attention of the train system, then you have to go to the bus system, because train are the most efficient. It can be LRTs, it can be under overground trains, because we in Sri Lanka use in a way that 1863, this 1860s, the first train has been transported from Colombo to Ambepus in Sri Lanka. In London, underground train started in 1863. Within that period, how it has been grown, and Sri Lanka, what has happened? That is what we have to say. We have to see, compared to the population in the, especially in the western province, Colombo metropolitan area, Gampaha and Kalutara districts. So, lot of people every day they have to use public transport or the private transport to come to Colombo, to go to anywhere. But if we can introduce a efficient train system. That is not what I am telling, that the current existing train system, train lines and the trains. We have to pay the attention for that one also, but that is not enough, because these are very limited lines. From if you take Western province, it is from Kalutara, Panudura to Abebussa, and other way from the Jayala, and next one is maybe up to Padukka. So, this is only 3 lines we have. So, we can't remain on that one. So, if you go have a satellite picture from top, you can see what are the highly populated areas in this Western province. First, you have to pay the attention for the Western province, because it is a highly populated, and most people are seeking their transportation every day, maybe millions of miles during a day. So, then you have to see what are the areas you have to put light trains, you have to put overground trains, because do not miss that the trains and the overground trains. There are 2 types of things. It is true that all are going over the overground, but the system of the train operating is different. So, we have to have this vision, as you told, it is not a rocket science. It is nothing to do with the big technologies to operate all these things. Only thing, as you tell, that is we have to have a very common sense, what are the areas you need trains, and you have to establish, but you can't do it within 1 or 2 years, but you have to start it today. At least within 20 years you can have a good network of trains.
Now, Dr. Dileepa, let us look at the cost of operating private vehicles, cars and so on. You have to build highways, you have to maintain them, the cost of fuel, the cost of the cars themselves, and nowadays with the rupee having plunged over the last 2 years, 2.5 years, the cost of a car is absolutely prohibitive, both to the individual and to the nation. And of course, then cost of spare parts, and there are so many costs. At the same time, yes, trains and buses, public transport, there is a cost, but surely it is only a fraction of the cost of having private transport. Would you agree with that?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I think a measurement of development in a country can be kind of taken by the advancement of public transport. So, if you think about future, right, there is no argument that public transport is the way forward, not just cost wise, development wise, environment, sustainability wise. Public transport is the way forward. So, I don't know, unfortunately we have not paid attention to public transport.
But Dr. Dileepa, now you said one of the aspects of a developed nation is that it would have a super efficient public transport. We have been told by our political leaders that we would be a developed nation by 2020, 2025, 2030, and now I think it is 2048. But nothing has been done towards public transport. So, if we keep going like this, 2048 will arrive at some point, and we will still have the same buses and trains that we have had since the 1970s. So, there is clearly a lack of political leadership here.
Yeah. So, if I talk about us, right, so our kind of major pillar in transport is public transport, and we have developed a kind of a comprehensive plan to develop the public transport, and our first priority is the train system, then comes the bus system, right. So, we are suggesting, I mean, you need to have a plan, right. So, we are suggesting ways in which we can improve the train system, how we can improve the bus system, right. So, when it comes to train system, we are proposing that so where there is a single track, to make it double track, right. Where there is 2 tracks, that will be around kind of major towns and suburbs, to make it 3 tracks and to extend the existing railway network to reach areas that are not reached at the moment. So, that is one way of like and then when it comes to buses, we say that not just buses, but the trains, we say that state has to play a role, right. So, if you allow the market to handle transport, we have seen what has happened at the moment, right. So, there has to be a state intervention. So, when it comes to us, education, health and transport are the main areas where state has to kind of intervene in a grand way.
But when it comes to bus transport, correct me if I am wrong, but there is state intervention, because the route licenses have to be given by the state, whether it is, I think it's the provincial councils. So, there is a check and balance there, but it's not working. And the reason for private buses to be introduced in the 1980s was actually to provide a superior service, but in actual fact I think the CTB buses are providing a better service now than the private buses.
Sorry to disturb you. Do we have buses in Sri Lanka?
That's a good question. Do we actually have proper passenger buses?
We don't have buses, Niresh, in Sri Lanka. We have something called bus. We call bus. So, that is a lorry, something has built a body on top of lorry chassis. So, that is not a bus. I got to know, I read this medical report, medical article, because of that using this lorry body something, I am not telling to bus, lorry body something, which are using for the long transport, long distance transport, people have got this back pains.
And also from the point of view of safety, comfort and safety.
Comfort and safety, and also I don't know, that is fuel consumption and everything. So, that is why we have to introduce that low flow the real buses. Now, in India, they are producing and they are sending us these lorry chassis things, but in their country they are not using it, they are using real buses. So, that is why we have to think about that, how we are going to produce, give a good transport system, that is a convenient transport to the people.
So, going back to the question you asked, now if you take the, maybe these are not the latest figures, but if you take the percentage of state sector buses and accepting your definition, right, and the private sector buses, state sector is having kind of a 14%.
6,000 to 19,000 buses.
And 86% are kind of private buses. Now, the issue is, now private buses operate on a profit basis. So, when you operate on a profit basis, certain, I mean, then you do not consider transport as a service, right. Then what happens is, at the moment there are various issues involved with public transport. When you take night time, in the entire public transport system collapsed. When you go kind of move to by roads, even in towns, right, the transport public transport system does not work. If you go to rural villages, places, it does not work. So, there has to be a state intervention to balance this, right. So, our policy is that both public and private owners should intervene, right. They should jointly handle this, but state has a bigger role. So, we are suggesting that to fix this issue, I mean, there are various issues to be fixed. A strong state intervention is needed, right. So, so that is when it comes to buses, and also I mean, there are a lot of issues involved with long distance transport, short distance transport, main roads, by roads. So, to address all these aspects, we are highlighting that state should intervene in a strong way.
Excellent. Professor Rohana, now the plans, the blueprints for electrification of the railway go back to the 70s or the 60s, I believe, when the plans were drawn up. But nothing was ever done, and the excuse trotted out by successive governments was that there is not enough power generated by our power plants, and that electrification of the railways would take up a lot of power. But now, especially with the present government focusing on power generation, wind power and so on, there should be enough power supply, don't you think?
Yeah, you see that Sri Lanka needs only nearly 2.8 gigawatts for whole country to current situation, and we are producing it in a different way, that is hydropower and coal and diesel. Also we are using much, but we have to replace it, and other two wind power and the solar. So, 2.8 we are producing it, but when we are growing, at least we need another 1 gigawatts. If you are going to introduce this one with the electric trains and other things. And also you see that when we compare with when we see the possibility of and our availability of the wind power availability offshore and inshore, and inshore ones only we have nearly 90 gigawatts capacity, but if we take we can extract nearly 40 gigawatts. Actually, we don't need 40 gigawatts. If we can have 2-3 gigawatts, that's more than enough for this country. So that's what people are not thinking, the politicians and others. That's what and also wind power is the most reliable and the sustainable one, because you see that solar power you can generate only during the daytime and only if the sun is available. During last like this heavy rainy seasons, and you can't produce, but the wind power you can produce 24 hours. So it is more sustainable and more generatable, and that's why we have to move for this kind of alternate the environmental friendly and the alternative power system. And also most of the countries I have examined that if it is trains, they are separate power generating systems. That means they are not taking from the main grid.
I see. But regardless of how it is generated, and of course we do need to move away from fossil fuels, but regardless of that, we do have enough power and we will continue to have more power, and it's quite enough, isn't it?
Yeah, because only problem is in Sri Lanka, but actually Champikarana is the number one expert in this power and energy in Sri Lanka, and he has always is telling that power what we are generating is enough for the country at present, but if we are going further, sometimes we need to have more, but at present we need, but unfortunately we are failing to supply them with a reasonable price and all these things, but we are not talking about that. But if we want to have a efficient and cheaper public transport system, we need to have cheap energy, because if we are running trains by using the electric power, so then we need to have cheaper electric power.
Now, Dr. Dileepa, I recall about 30 years ago or more, India's massive rail network was electrified, and it was done by the engineers of Indian Rail. themselves. It wasn't foreign companies which came in to do that. And it was a fairly simple process. They didn't immediately change the tracks. They instead ran the power cable above the railway, and they converted the diesel locomotives to electric. Fairly simple from an engineer's point of view, I suppose. Why can't we do the same thing?
Yeah, I think I want to tell you one thing now. Now, I think compared to India, we were the first to propose electrification in railways. That was done in 1918 by engineer Vimala Surendra. He has calculated the potential of electricity generation from Kalani River and Mahaveli River, and he was proposing that we could have a huge extra electricity that was far beyond the demand of the country at that time, and he was proposing a kind of a industrialization program like the one they had in India, but it didn't happen, right? Because of the colonials as well as our kind of elites who ran this country all these years, because they were not interested in doing that. They were depending on the colonial economy. So when it comes to the other question, so I think, yes, you can think of electrification, but I think at the moment, shifting from private vehicles to public transport, efficient public transport is a major step forward when you think about sustainability, right? That itself is a major step forward. And then the question arises, like, even to generate electricity, you need some kind of a energy source, right? It can also from diesel, right? Or hydroelectricity or other renewable sources. So I think that possibility is there. So you can think about it, but at the moment, the priority is to focus on public transport. And when I think about sustainability, we are also suggesting various other measures the developed countries have already implemented when it comes to transport. For example, we are suggesting that in the kind of main cities in the island, we have kind of parallel cycle lanes and pedestrian lanes also, because people can walk, people can cycle, right? And so we are also coordinating with our research and development team and the education policy team to coordinate the requirements of the transport sector and to kind of give their input to fulfill the needs of the transport sector. So why not having some, at least as a pilot project, some cycle lanes, and you have to improve the cycles, not the kind of existing ones. So we are also thinking in that line, because our plan is that we should think long term, and oil will not be an option, right? Fossil fuel will not be an option in 20-30 years. So we have to kind of prepare our mindset to move in that direction.
Now, Dr. Dileepa, you mentioned the need for state intervention in a lot of these, which is given because the private sector hasn't delivered. But we do have a Minister of Transport, we have a Minister of Railways, we have all kinds of ministers dealing with, highways, so many ministers. But nothing seems to get done. I mean, if you go to the Fort railway station, it is the same station which was there as far as I can remember 40 years ago. Perhaps others would say it's been that way even further, further back. Why is that? No development there, and the station is absolutely dirty. Even keeping it clean doesn't seem to happen. We still have that old stubs of tickets which are handed out, and then when you are walking out of the station at the end of the journey, we have people, railway workers who physically take that from you. I mean, this is so expensive
Yeah.
to the population, to the state, to everybody. And it's something which is quite ridiculous. You know, those ticket stubs, why have that? So what's going on? It's almost it's a mental state of not wanting to move forward.
I think having a minister is not going to sort this out. We had ministers throughout, right? So I think what you need is proper planning and dedication to do it. Now, I think this is a classic example of the ignorance of the ruling parties we had so far on general public. I mean, they haven't, they were not traveling by public transport, right? All these political elites, right? So they were trying to fix their own problem when it comes to transport, widening roads, you know, how to lessen traffic. They were those are the kind of focusers. So if you bring public, the general public to the center of planning, the entire scenario changes. Then you have to think about, you know, the quality of railway stations and whether you have to use this all you know, railway cards.
Now you spoke of bringing the general public into the equation, but one of the biggest problems is once a politician gets elected to parliament and becomes a cabinet minister, the public can't reach them. How are you supposed to reach them? You don't have their phone number. Even if you do, they won't answer it. You can't go and meet them. It's nearly impossible. They are never in their electorate. They are all in Colombo after that. So you can't give them your feedback. So how do you get the public and the politicians to interact? Now, if your party were to win the election, and I deliberately don't say the word power, I say win the election, and if you were to form a government, would there be a process where, say on a weekly basis for 2 or 3 days a week, the ministers have to meet the public, that anyone can walk in? Because otherwise, it's back to a system of rulers and ruled.
Yeah.
And none of this would happen.
Now, I think you are talking with the existing experience, right? So we have a kind
Yes,
of a very
for
corrupt,
decades, for decades.
very corrupt political culture, right? And the politicians who are in power kind of behaving as like, you know, the rulers, the kings. So we had that terminology, right? Kings and Utumanos and all this stuff. So I think we need a kind of a major change in that political culture. So I think we will definitely change that political culture. That is one of our main slogans, right? We will do that. So so I understand you. I mean, that this is our experience for decades, right? So we tend to think that, you know, politicians are like that all the time, but it is not. I mean, we have to change that culture. So when it comes to us, we are kind of saying that we should make subjects citizens, right? And even in our policy, we are suggesting that the passenger should also get organized. Magi Sangam, right? So can be train passenger organizations, bus passenger organizations, three-wheeler passengers, right? So we are suggesting that we are welcoming their organization and their pressure, and also we are saying we are proposing that they should also be involved with planning, not just act as pressure groups, but with planning. So there are different ways you can, you know, try to bring general public to the center.
Now, let's look at several other segments of the population who are unable to use public transport as the transport system is today. I'm specifically speaking of the elderly. an elderly person cannot get onto a bus, cannot get onto a train, because it's physically impossible the way our trains and buses are designed. And we have an aging population. So, this is of paramount importance. Then also we have a large number of, I do not know if the correct word is handicapped or physically disabled, the terminology
Differently able now.
differently abled,
Now they are using differently
the
able.
terminology changes, but
Yeah.
people who are differently abled can't get on a bus, can't get on a train, and also pregnant ladies, the same applies. So, a very large segment of the population is unable to use the public transport system, and that is actually against the law. There are 2 Supreme Court judgments, and there is an act of parliament which went through decades ago, and several gazettes were issued on this. So, public transport and any public building is supposed to be accessible to all these people. That is the law, but that is not happening. So, again let me ask you, Professor, how can this be implemented?
Yeah, it is very easy, because in most of the countries, even the developing countries like India, Malaysia, and Thailand and all these countries, even Ethiopia, you can see that the buses are now, that is why I told there is no buses. Buses are low flats buses, right, and it should be, when we are planning these buses and the pavements, it should be, you can see that in other countries that it is in the par with the level of the bus, and when you come with that, you can push it directly to the bus, and also the stations. And stations platform is this size, and train is this size or this size, like that, and they are not matching the train that what you call this footboard, what you call that you are getting down the door, and the platform. It should be in the equal way, and that is why, and there should not be gap. There shouldn't be a gap. There may be a gap with 1 or 2 inches. When you say that in developed countries, they mind the gap, they say, when the train stops, before train stop, they say mind the gap. Mind the gap means there is a small gap, you have to mind that one. So, that is why it is a planning, it is a not the planning, it is a designing. Okay. I do not know why these engineers and all these people are designing like that. It is very easy, it is not a rocket science, it is just a simple you have common sense, that you have designed it like that, that is finished.
Absolutely.
You forgot one important sector, women. Public transport for women is a highly unsafe
It's a nightmare.
space.
It's a
nightmare, because if I give an example, when I was traveling today to come here from the public bus from Kottao to here, there was a guy in the bus who was trying to touch women. There was a guy sitting somewhere, so I kind of warned him. So he moved to another place and again tried to touch another woman,
So it's
another girl,
harassment.
right? So I somehow managed to get the guy out of the bus, right? But now it's a nightmare for women. So I think when you are talking about public transport, that is something we have to fix as well. So we are suggesting various measures to make public transport a safer place for women.
Now, gentlemen, what strikes me from our discussion so far is that none of these solutions which we have discussed has a high cost to it. It's practical. It's and Dr. Dileepa, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to ask you to field the last question. Do you agree that most of these can be done through homegrown solutions, our own engineers, our own technicians and so on, and we don't need to have billion-dollar contracts? It would be nice in the future of course to have that kind of technology, but immediately a lot can be done.
Of course, I do agree. I mean, a lot can be done, but I think if we have to think towards future, maybe we need to kind of improve capacity, right? So when it comes to the NPP, we are suggesting a kind of a parallel education path, vocational education path, in addition to the existing academic path, so that we will kind of provide the additional resources we need, because when it comes to public transport, we are saying that we need to maintain with local resources, but at some point we need to go further. We need to kind of assemble and even produce. So I think if we have a dedication, we can do that.
And Professor, would you agree with that summing up?
Yeah, I think that we can do to some extent that with the existing resources. But I want to tell you that if you make a cost benefit analysis, if we introduce a efficient public transport priority with the trains, and then comes the buses, and there are some other ways or means and ways like ships, cometers through the ships and with the sea and the
ferry services,
ferry services, etc. But if you make a cost benefit analysis correctly, you will see the money that you are saving from introducing the public transport, that is a very huge amount that we can use for the development of the public transport. You know that every year we are spending nearly 3 billion to import petrol and diesel, and if we can half of that one, that's enough for every year to develop, which we can pump to the development of the public transport.
Absolutely. And on that note, I am afraid that we are out of time. It's been a very fruitful discussion, and I hope that the future policymakers of this country were watching. And my thanks to Senior Professor Rohana Mahaliyanaarachchi. Thank you very much, Professor, and also Dr. Dileepa Witharana, representing the NPP. Professor, of course, represents the URF. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion, and to you at home for tuning in. Thank you very much, and good night.